happiest day of my life.
This is the best show in the world.
Oh, that's good.
Greenbrier.
This is
SPED Talks.
Once you see it, come to the right place.
Kelly.
How
Brenda.
do we do it day after day?
Welcome back to SPED Talks, episode 3.
Accommodations. So last time in episode 2 we had a special guest and it worked out so lovely. We thought, why not have another special guest?
Utilizing our resources in the building.
So today, welcome the one and only, our fabulous social worker, Megan Dames.
Hi, ladies. How are ya?
Good.
Doing well.
We're doing well. All right, you ready to talk about accommodations, ladies?
Let's do it.
An accommodation changes how the student accesses and demonstrates learning, but does not change what the student is expected to learn or demonstrate. So essentially, it just enhances the student's ability to participate.
And this is something that's more than just good teaching or best practices. This is something that goes above and beyond that.
There are accommodations in the general education setting, and then also assessment accommodations. Let's start with classroom accommodations.
Preferred seating, my favorite. I think it's something that's commonly on many IEPs, but I'm not sure that people are always sure what it means.
Like I said before, it's more than just good teaching. Every student should have a great seat in the classroom, but this goes above and beyond.
It looks different for every student. So
Yes.
somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing or, has a hearing aid needs to be away from the door, needs to be kind of away from everything, needs to be where they can see the teacher and their peers.
When somebody who needs to move a lot needs a seat that has space around it, so they're not interfering with their peers' learning, but they're getting the movement that they need while still being able to attend to the instruction.
Or if they have extreme distractibility needs and they need a lot of cueing, they should be positioned close to an adult.
Frequent check-ins for understanding are really important for a lot of our kids with IEPs, and that can be just a quick 2-second conversation where the teacher just has a verbal check-in with the student. You could sometimes do it non-verbally, maybe a little post-it where the student just kind of writes down what they are having to do next, but sometimes I feel like the frequent check-ins maybe get lost a bit in the accommodation list, and that's really a super important one.
Verbal directions paired with visuals is also an important accommodation. We usually remember very well to do the verbal directions, but following that up with some sort of visual reminder to the students that have difficulty with attention or might have difficulty remembering all of the steps. So having maybe on a post-it note or writing it on the board for the whole class so everybody is aware of what's expected. It could be a visual accommodation that provides the student with the process or steps to solving a problem, such as in math or science. Or it could be even having visual support with a writing checklist next to the student so that they know these are the things that I need to include in my paper.
I also think the wait time for verbal responses is another big one. I think sometimes we think we're giving students enough time and then almost like it became a little awkward. It might seem a little awkward to you, but it's giving them the time needed to process this information. And if you have questions about any of these classroom accommodations, feel free to contact the case manager and we'll for sure help you out.
So assessment accommodations can take place in the classroom. They can also take place in a smaller setting with one of the members of the special ed team. The teacher needs to probably be in good communication with the case manager to figure out time, location, and scheduling is really, really important to make sure that there's team members available to give the students the best possible chance to show us what they know.
Activating background knowledge too is something that would just be good teacher practice, but I think too, like going a little bit more in depth and like referencing that, especially before Fontes and Pinnell, things like that require you to have some kind of knowledge already formulated to answer some of those comprehension questions.
Supplementary aids, they're a little bit different than accommodations. They're the actual visual or tangible things that the student requires to access their environment. So that could look like a visual schedule. That could also look like providing manipulatives and a number line.
Graphic organizers are really important aids as well that can be used across content areas.
Access to fidget or oral inputs, like sometimes that's very set and, it's a chewy or it's something that they can put in their hands, but also sometimes kids might pick up like a paper clip or something like that, and you may think that it's just to play with it or to kind of futz around.
I think as long as they're using the tool in a safe and appropriate manner, kids use a lot of different things. It could be a rubber band, it could be a paper clip, it could be an eraser. As long as it's not disturbing themselves or the other students around them and they're still able to participate in what's happening in the classroom, be comfortable with what they're using.
Where do we find a student's accommodations?
Lots of places. They're in the IEP. They're in the IEP at a glance that we provide to any staff member in the building that works with the student, because accommodations are something that the student has access to all during the school day. So PE, Spanish, lunchtime sometimes if a student has an accommodation there. So they can really be found quickly on those IEP at a glances, and really the teachers and staff should keep those pretty handy. They should be accessing them quite frequently to make sure that they're giving the students the accommodations that they need.
How are accommodations determined?
Well, accommodations are determined prior to the development of a student's IEP. So if a student is being initially evaluated and they do qualify for special education services, throughout that process, there's a lot of data collection, a lot of observations happening, a lot of communication with the teachers, finding out what things benefit that student, what is currently being utilized, what's been tried but proven unsuccessful, and putting those things in place at the beginning, at the start of their IEP.
And really, especially if it's an initial IEP, the most important person to kind of give us that information is going to be the classroom teacher. What have you been doing with them? What has worked? What hasn't worked? What's really important? What are you doing for this student that's different or above and beyond what you're having to do for other students in your classroom?
Based on the evaluation results, the team can also then add accommodations according to whatever those specific needs are for speech and language, for example.
Although accommodations might be similar across students, the reason that it's put in place for that individual student is based on individual need. So that student has demonstrated through evaluation process or through the RTI process that they need certain accommodations put into place. How often do you have to provide accommodations?
All the time.
All the time, right? This is an educational environment. If it's listed on the student's IEP or 504, they get accommodations across the board. Who is responsible for implementing accommodations? Whoever is working with the student is responsible for implementing the accommodations. So PE, it's the gym teacher. Science, Tracy Maynez. Whoever's in charge or instructing the student at that time is going to be the one that's implementing the accommodations.
I mean, it's their legal responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a legal document. It's not a choice. If we have determined as an IEP team, which the parents and teacher are a part of, that this is something the student requires to access their education, then they get it.
What happens if you forget to use an accommodation? Well, that's a good question. It depends on the circumstance. If you're just in the general education classroom and you see a kid who might have like some attentional needs and might need a fidget and you don't implement one,
It happens.
It happens and no one's going to come and arrest you. But moving forward, it's very important. However, if they have an accommodation for any kind of testing or any kind of assignment in classroom-based assignments or assessments, if you don't give a student an accommodation that's listed on their IEP, let's say somebody has an accommodation for activating background knowledge or a separate location for assessments, and you give them the Fontes and Pinnell in the hallway or at a small table, that is not a valid assessment because you did not give them the accommodations they needed to be successful. So to kind of boil it down, if you don't give students their accommodations, whatever data collection or measurement you're using to collect that information is invalid.
And the student will likely have to be reassessed.
Where do we find some of the things listed in the accommodations? If somebody says they need a weight strip or a timer, where do we find those good things?
It's a great question. I mean, really, most members of the IEP teams, whether that's the special ed teachers / case managers or the social workers or our occupational therapists or our speech path, we all have a variety of tools at our disposal that we're happy to share with classroom teachers. So they can simply come down and ask. If there's something that a student's requiring that we don't have, we can get it from the district or order it if we need to. But for quick access to things like fidgets or Velcro strips or a weighted vest, we typically have those things on hand in our offices.
And before we conclude this section, I'd like to mention that if at any time you're finding that an accommodation is not working for a student or doesn't prove beneficial to that student, you need to speak with the case manager right away. And we can evaluate that, determine if it's something that we need to take off the IEP, or on the other hand, if there's something that you think they're really benefiting from that you've implemented and tried out and found successful for that student, that's something we need to know also so we can add it onto the IEP.
So basically, is it just best teaching practices? No. We're very blessed with amazing teachers here, and you guys go above and beyond, and we are well aware of that, and our students are lucky to have that. But it kind of takes that additional step needed to make sure that these accommodations are put in place. Uh-oh, Brenda.
Whoop, whoop.
You know what that means.
Prize alert.
Prize alert. Megan, pick a number.
8.
So whoever is the lucky number of viewer 8 to stop by or email Brenda or myself, you'll be receiving a prize. Also, same thing. Random chance winner. 2 winners. We like to give away some of our favorite things.
2 winners. Wow.
Yeah.
Come get those prizes. Come get them.
So thank you again, and we appreciate it. And until next time, I'm Kelly.
I'm Brenda.